All right. Welcome everyone to the Lodic Game QC webinar. My name is Logan Shank, and I'm the Lodic Data Tech at the NOC, and I'll be presenting today. Before I get started, I just want to make sure that everyone can see my screen and hear me clearly. Cool. Also, just make sure that you're muted unless you want to ask a question, so we can reduce the noise on the recording. So yeah, we will be recording this webinar for folks that were not able to attend, or so that you can reference this at a later date. We will pause and ask questions, but please feel free to use the chat feature to ask your questions as well. Nicole's going to be watching the chat, and we'll take a couple of breaks throughout the presentation to address some of those questions, and we can cover them at the end as well. So here we have an agenda for today. We'll be using a bunch of new tools and files that were listed in an email that we sent out on Monday. Also note that the data management protocol has a list of tools and files needed for each step that we'll be covering today. And that most of you have at least skimmed the data management protocol and have looked at the web map at this point. Has anyone not used these documents yet this season? Cool. Was everyone able to view the data summary and photos that we're going to be using for the webinar? As a reminder, the data summary was on the general channel of Teams. We know that last year folks struggled with where they could find photo comments, and we have put these on Teams in the general channel. Generally today, for this presentation, we're not going to dive too deep into the photo comments, so we're just going to mention it. Those will be available for you in the future. And most folks haven't been in the error log yet, so we'll make sure that we spend some time looking over that. Does anyone have any questions at this point about the tools or teams? If anyone is struggling at any point to follow the tools or files we're using today, make sure to consult the list of tools and files we sent out as part of the homework, and you can reach out to Jacob Shipman with any questions on Teams. So the goal for today of this webinar is to walk through the process of how we update the reach evaluation status in the web map, review photos and data summary, and track and resolve errors in the error log. This is covered in steps 5 through 7 of the data management and QAQC protocol. We've revamped the process quite a bit, and we want to make sure that everyone knows how to use these tools. Steps 5 and 6 should occur about after each trip and should be done by either one or both the crew manager and the project lead. Step 7 ideally occurs after each trip as well, but should be at least done once a month. Certain errors can easily be reviewed by crew managers, while project leads may need to make the final decision about what data gets edited or removed. Remember to make sure everyone's role is clearly defined. Here in this table from the data management protocol, we went through and added some color scheme to it to try and highlight who's the responsible party for each step of the process. It's very common for contractors to lead many of these steps and follow up with project leads if there are any questions, or for the contractor and project lead to work jointly on these tasks. It's important to remember, though, that the project lead should have the final say in many of these decisions, for example, verifying not sampled reaches and any suggested data changes. So here in this flow chart, like I said, we're going to be going through steps 5 down through step 7. Step 5, which is updating the web map evaluation status after the crew has done a field visit, and then step 6, which is reviewing the photos and data summary. We'll get through steps 5 and 6 for each reach, the crew evaluated, and then repeat step 5 and 6 for the remaining reaches in the crew's data summary. The purpose of step 5 is to ensure the crew is sampling the correct reaches, collecting proper data, and that the design is being implemented and tracked properly and consistently, while step 6 is catch errors in the highest priority and most error-prone concepts before the crew continues to collect data. So both steps 5 and 6 involve reviewing the data summary. The crew should have uploaded the data summary to Teams as soon as they get back from the field. The first step is to navigate to your data summary on Teams. I already have this pulled up. If you haven't found this, this is in the general channel in the QC folder. Generally, you'll find these in your project-specific channels within Teams. Note for this presentation that some of the data that we have has been edited for demonstration purposes. So if you notice any sites that look familiar, just know that we have likely changed numbers to work for our purposes. So, like I said before, the first step of this process is to go through step 5, which can be found on page 15 of the data management protocol. To do this, we will check that each reach in the data summary is also in the web map. Next, we'll check that the correct location was field visited, and that the point was not moved incorrectly. Ensure you agree with the field status and update the web map eval status in the points layer. And lastly, you will record all errors in the error log. So I'm going to jump back here to the error log, and we will start with the first site that the crew visited. This is QCSS 2340. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy that point ID. If we look over, it looks like the crew said this site was a non-target lintic site. So the first step, as I mentioned here in the agenda for step 5, we're going to check that the reach in the data summary is also in the web map. Easiest way to do that is you will go to AGOL. Today I'll be using the training office eval map. When you're actually doing this season, you'll be using the actual 2020 office eval map. If you have any questions with how to access this, reach out to Jacob Shipman and he'll help walk you through. With your point ID copied, the easiest way to find your point when you're doing your review is just come up here in the upper right-hand corner and paste in the point ID here. As you can see, it says points and it has the point ID. You can either click that or you can just hit enter. It's going to take you directly to that point on the map. I'm going to go over here into the contents and flip on the field visits. This. As you can see, if the point was sampled, or it was not sampled, but there's a field visit on the map, so that's good. Next, we want to make sure they visited the correct point. Point IDs match. This is where they were supposed to go, 20340. 20340. If you want to check and make sure distance to see how far the field visit was recorded from the point, you can come up here to the measure tool and select this distance option and change it to meters. And then we can see how far the field visit was recorded from the point. In this case, it was 6.5 meters, so it's the same exact location pretty much. So while I'm in here, I'm going to check. We saw that it was in the data summary from Sarah, the crew said it was non-target lintic. We want to make sure that here, this field eval status and reason not sampled in their field visit matches. In this case, it does. They said it was not sampled lintic, so that's good. Next thing I'd want to do is go and just read the comments both in the field visits and in their Sarah summary. And this says, in imagery, it appears there would be a channel, but on the ground, no channel was visible. We cannot identify any bankful features, and they looked 75 meters upstream and downstream of F. Now I'm going to come back over here into my Sarah summary. If I scroll over to the right, we have general comments. Here the crew said, riparian vegetation definitely creates a linear feature that looks like it could have a stream on imagery, but there is no sign of channel anywhere. We cannot find bankful features, and they looked upstream and downstream of F. So the two comments are similar. The next step in the process is we want to go on box and see the photos, just make sure that we agree that the crew properly classified this as lintic. Go back into box. For BLM users, we have links to box in our critical documents file that is on the general channel of Teams. We've noticed that this year, if you just try and go into your browser and type box.com in, it will redirect you to a site that says that it's blocked by the DOI. It's an unapproved website. To get around this, just go to accounts.box.com or find one of the links that we've sent out. Those should all work. This year we added the ability for all users to sign in to a shared account so that they can have some new functionality like being able to search for point IDs. Last year, a lot of people spent a ton of time just trying to find photos from a site, especially when you have 20 pages of photos to look through. The information on our new account can be found in the data management protocol, so reference that if you're trying to sign in to Box. So here, I'm signed into Box. Now the easiest way to find my photos from this site is to come up here to the search bar. I have my point ID. I copy it. I'm going to paste that in here, and I'm going to put it in quotes. This will search for only that point ID. And I hit enter. And here's our photo. I'm not sure why it wasn't searching properly. So it looks like the crew took one photo from this site. For not sampled sites, the crew should be taking 4 photos. This isn't something for not sampled sites that we really want to spend too much time on trying to find these photos. In this case, I would just reach out to the crew and ask them if they have any more photos, any recorded on their cell phones. Sometimes the crew members might be on opposite ends of the reach, and one person has an iPad, the other person just has their phone, and they just want to take a photo. Sometimes they forget to sync that and add it back into Sarah. So I touch base with the crew and make sure they're not missing any photos. But really, you should only be recording this in an error log if you notice that every single site that is not sampled only has like 1 photo and not the required 4. Within Box, once you click on the photos, it'll take you into full screen mode. You notice there's a little crosshair in the center of my screen with a little magnifying glass. If you click, you can zoom in. Just hitting escape will take you back out of that mode. That can be super helpful, especially when you're trying to see review crews bank plot photos to see if they really called deposition correctly. You can really zoom in on the grasses. One issue with photos that I've noticed from the past is that sometimes crew will take photos on their phone and then upload them to Sarah. If you notice that when you open this, the photo doesn't take up the whole screen and it's smaller, if you zoom in and it becomes extremely pixelated, that is an issue you want to bring up with the crew. It's likely that they're just not sending the full actual size photo over to the iPad when they want to upload that. So getting back to this example, looking at this one photo, I agree. It kind of looks like a channel, but I don't see any clear channel through the grasses. It's all pretty dense. In this case, I would take the crew's word for it that they properly classified this as lentic. So now that I agree with this, I would come in to the data summary or into the web map. I'd go to the points layer, click edit. And here for eval status, I want to update this. It's either not sampled, BLM approved, or not sampled, not yet BLM approved, depending on if you're a BLMer or not. And then you'll go to the reason not sampled, and you'll put in non-target lentic. Now you're done reviewing this site. Now we can move on to the next site in the data summary. As a reminder, what we just went over was just step 5. It can be found on page 15 of the data management protocol. Here, I'm going to go back into my data summary, and we're going to look at our next point, which is QCSS 1099. I'll look over this site. Was recorded as permanently inaccessible, terrain access denied. So let's go to the web map and see if this is on here. My little box will go out of the way. All right, in this example, I'm already zoomed to the point. As a reminder, when you're doing this, you copy and paste the point ID up here into the upper right-hand corner. It'll take you directly to the site on the map. Come over here to my Contents tab and turn on our field visits. All right. We have a field visit. Looks like they sampled the correct location. Let's see what they recorded for their status here. Permanently inaccessible, train access denied. All right. Next, let's read over some of their comments while we're here in the field visits. Extremely dense veg on both banks acted like impenetrable walls that we could not take measurements through. Since we did not feel confident about being able to sample 5 transects, we determined that we should mark this as permanently inaccessible terrain. Now let's jump back into their SARA summary and see what they recorded in SARA. So I'm going to scroll over here to the right to general comments. And in SARA, the crew just said vegetation was too thick. So first thing I noticed after reading this comment was here in the web map, the crew mentioned that they weren't sure how they could take the measurements through an impenetrable wall. If you're reading over the comments and see something like this, it's a great thing to reach out to the crew and remind them how to take measurements. If they're trying to measure through vegetation using their depth rod, kind of attaching their wheel tape to one end of the depth rod and then poking that through the vegetation and just trying to walk them through that process of how they would sample that instead of just writing it off. The next thing I see, I noticed here on the map, let me turn off the points real quick, field visits, we have some black symbology here. It looks like an X and a star. If I come over here to the previously evaluated, we can see that the X's represent not sampled points and the stars represent previously sampled points. So let's click on these. Here it looks like from 2019, the site was skipped. In 2013, it was sampled with interrupted flow. And then here in 2016, it was sampled a full reach. So right off the bat, I'm a little concerned that the crew said that it was permanently inaccessible terrain when we have evidence that it had been sampled at least twice in the past. So next, I want to go onto Box, and I want to search for these photos. As a reminder, if you just put them in quotes up here at the top, you should search for only that site code. I already have this pulled up just to try and speed things up a little bit. So once you look at the photos, you want to just kind of click through it first and just see if you agree with their status. And based off the photos, it does look extremely vegetated, but I do see a channel, and I do feel pretty confident that if I was there, I would be able to walk up that channel and get the measurements at 5 or more transects. It doesn't look like it's too horribly overgrown, or I don't see anything jumping out at me that I would feel dangerous or that I was at risk trying to sample this site. Also on here, looks like we have photos from previous samples. In this example, you can tell it has 2013 in the date. For all the sites that you're reviewing, that your crews will be sampling this year, on Box, you'll just be able to refer to this date down here. For this example, I copied all these photos, so the upload date is all the same from July 2nd, pretty much, but if this was a real example, this would be like July 2nd, 2013. So you easily know that, okay, these were taken a couple years ago versus these were just uploaded last week, sort of thing. And I really recommend looking over all the photos. In this example, we can see from the previous sample that people are fighting their way into the veg to collect the data. So in this example, I think this point was improperly classified and not sampled. I'm going to come back over here into the office eval map. I'm going to find my point. I'm going to click edit. For eval status, I'm going to change it from ready to field visit to reattempt. You can see this updated to a green question mark. Over here is our symbology for our points layer. Basically, we set up everything that the crew should be looking at and paying attention to as green, whether it's ready to field visit or you didn't do something right and you need to go back to the site, which is a reattempt. Once that is marked, I would record any errors. I'd probably record something in the error log, just making a note that the crew improperly classified this and I want them to go back because I want this data from this site. But I'm going to skip over that step right now. We'll get to that for the next example. As a review, still for this site, all we did was step 5, updating evaluation status, which can be found on page 15 of the data management protocol. So before I move on to the next point, are there any questions? And is everyone able to follow along so far? Cool. So now we're going to go back into our Sarah summary. We're going to go to our third reach. Again, recommend the first thing you do is just open here and just copy the point ID because you're going to need to paste that here in the subsequent steps. And if we look over, you can see this site was sampled and the crew said it was a partial reach. So let's go into the web map again. As a reminder, if you want to go directly to a point, you just paste the point ID up here in this upper right-hand corner in the search bar and hit enter, and it'll take you directly to the point on the map. Come over to my content and turn on my field visits. On this one, we see it's like a hollow circle, indicating that it was not fully sampled. So let's click on this field visit and see what the crew said. It said sampled partial reach, so that matches what the crew recorded in their data summary. Next, first thing I notice is that we have a stream on the base map that flows over here. We have the NHD line that we use to draw the points. That flows right here, and then over here is where the point is. When you're doing your review, you can easily flip on imagery to see if did you go to the right location. Okay, yeah, you're right on the stream. It's perfect. I don't need to worry about that not falling on the NHD line. The next step is you want to kind of read the crew's comments, try and figure out why it was partially sampled, and make sure you agree. And this permitted limited access to the site to a 4-hour window, so we could only collect 8 of 11 transects before having to pack up and leave. We were able to collect 2 passes of slope, flood-prone width, and pools. Well, they clearly told me why it was a partial site, how much data they were able to collect, and that we shouldn't worry about slope, flood-prone width, and pools because they were able to collect it all. So that's great if you notice that crews are recording partial sites where they don't give you any information at all. You should be addressing that with the crew and letting them know that they need to be recording, at least giving some detail as to what they collected, what they didn't collect, and kind of the reason why that the status is partial. Partial reaches are super tricky. We find a lot of issues with them when doing our QC. As a reminder, a partial reach is where any one of the 11 main transects or 10 intermediate transects is not collected completely. So now we will go back over into the Sarah summary. Let's check and see what they recorded here in their notes. Again, they wrote a very similar comment. This is just fine. These don't have to differ. The main thing to highlight here is that they gave good details as to what they did and why they did it. Next, I would just jump over and glance over the photos. Again, here on Box, I already have the photos pulled up. If you want to search for them, you can just put them in quotes up here at the top. I'm scrolling through. Looks like a pretty straightforward site. All right. So I don't have any issues here, so I wouldn't record any errors. And since this was sampled, we're going to jump into step 6. So let's go back to the agenda here. Basically, we just did our review of step 5. We made sure that the site was in the data summary, in the web map. We made sure they got the correct location. We made sure that the eval status is matched. And we glanced over the photos to make sure that we agree that the site was sampleable. So that's all good. Now, for all sampled reaches, we'll do step 6, which is photo and data summary review. As a reminder, this can be found on page 17 of the data management protocol. First part of this process is we want to check that the correct indicators were collected. Next, we want to look at photos. We want to make sure that they have the right number, and we want to orient ourselves to the site. Next, we want to review their critical concept lines and see if they're keying in on the correct elevations. Next, we will look over bank stability and cover, followed by flood-prone width. Look over some special situations considerations. And finally, we will record all errors that we identify in step 6 in the error log. So if I go back to my data summary, my SARA summary, here in column J, indicators used, this is a list of everything that was selected in SARA when the crew was setting up their site. Most part, I'm assuming most of the project leads know which indicators they should be collecting, the crew should be collecting at each point for their project. If you're not sure of where that information should be or what the crew should be collecting at each point, come here into the web map, click on your points layer, and here we have a list of everything that the crew should be collecting. In this case, FAWAG depth profile was yes. Over here, FAWAG was not in here, meaning that the crew did not select FAWAG when they were setting up their site in SARA. One thing to note, if you notice this, I'd recommend just reaching out to the crew. Sometimes the crew will just overlook this, but they may have recorded it on like a paper data sheet, or they might have recorded it somewhere else on their iPad to try and transcribe later and forgot about it. So just make sure you bring it up with the crew and remind them, oh, hey, you're supposed to be collecting this. Make sure you collect it in the future, sort of thing. Or you may, if the data is really important, you may need to try and advise them that if they're in the area, to try and stop back by and collect that data. So we looked over our indicators. We noticed the FAWAG was missing. This would be recorded in the error log, but for the moment, I'm just going to go through each of the steps, and then we will cover entering the errors in the error log at the very end. Next thing I want to do is we look at column K here as number of photos. This is the number of photos that were taken in SARA. Here at this site, the crew took 15. For sampled sites, they should have 16 photos. Let's go look at Box and see what we have. So for this site, I only see 15 photos, so they are missing one photo from the 16 required photos we ask for a sampled site. So again, I would check with the crew to see if they might have missed this. Maybe they have another photo on their phone, or maybe they took it on the iPad and just forgot to attach it to SARA before uploading their data. One of the key things here is that there are 15 photos here, there are 15 photos on SARA, so the counts are the same. It looks like we have everything that the crew submitted in this area, at least. And part of the orientation step, I'd recommend just kind of clicking through the photos at first. Try and orient yourself to the site. Is it high or low veg? Is it cobbly or silty substrate? Is it incised versus not incised? Try and orient yourself to the site as if you were actually at the site. All right. So next, I want to focus in on reviewing their critical concepts, which, as a reminder, is step 6C. So let's start looking at the data. In box, if you only want to review their critical concept photos, which can be super helpful if the crew is taking, sometimes the crew can take more than 20 photos at a site, and trying to scroll through everything and keep track of it can be a little bit of a headache sometimes. So in this case, I will add a plus sign and then put CC in quotes. Over that. Well, here are their two critical concept photos. They're right above each other. Let's click on one and I'll go to the next one. So while you're doing your critical concept review, you want to look for indicators and try and figure out where you would place the line and then determine if the crew's lines are in the correct location. So here I can see that the crew is saying that the floodplain or the bench feature and the bankful feature are at two different elevations. Looks like there's a significant difference between scour and bankful as well. Let's go look at their other photo real quick. All right, again, in both of these photos, when I review this, I'm scratching my head at why these two elevations are different. This area over here looks relatively flat. I don't see any huge break or change in elevation until maybe you get back here to where it starts sloping up. Also, I see that scour is way out in the middle of the water here, or even over here where it looks like it's closer, it still looks like it's down pretty low at around where bed meets bank would be placed. Here I see edge of sod forming veg, which is where I would be putting scour. It looks like this system is probably flowing just about at scour. So based on that, I would be expecting my scour line to be right up here hugging the bank, basically right around the water surface, and then bankful to be just above that. In this situation, I would likely call bankful and bench the same thing, since I don't see any clear difference between the two here. This should be orange. Sometimes the crews are missing that, and they'll just mark the two lines on top of each other. Nothing to really call them out on. It's just nice to remind them, oh, hey, if you think these are both the same, just try and mark it orange, an orange line to simplify things. It makes it a lot easier when reviewing photos. So basically, in review, we think that their bankful and bench elevations should be the same and look off. Scour looks like it's placed really low, so we do have some concerns here about what the crew was keying in on, and we would want to discuss this with them and try and have them explain what they found, what they were looking at, kind of where they placed the lines. Also, if you notice situations like this, it's good to bring it up with the crew, because in some situations we've heard that crews take the photos, their critical concept photos, while they're at the site, but they don't mark it up until later that day when they're at camp. If they do that, then they might not be remembering exactly where they measured it. So try and remind them, when you take the photo, you need to make sure you mark it up at the site so that you're placing your lines in the correct location. This makes it easier for all the data review when we know exactly kind of what the numbers correspond to when we're looking between photos and data. All right, so next we're going to move on to review their flood-prone width. Jump over here to their data summary. Let's see what kind of values they got. So here's their two locations. They have the flood-prone width 1 is 3.68 with the bankful width at 1.46. Their second location had a flood-prone width of 3.45 and a bankful width of 1.5. Let's go look at their photos and see if this makes sense given the site they were at. So here we can see that we have two photos with FW indicating flood-prone width. Let's look at these. So it looks like the crew. So while you're reviewing flood-prone width, you want to consider, did the crew take flood-prone width in two representative riffles parallel to the valley? If locations are not representative, record incorrect locations in the error log so the National AIM team can review and possibly omit this data. Also, you want to think, do the results make sense given the photos and critical concept review? In this case, here's the first photo. Let me go to the second one. I think these results make sense. There is no real confining feature, and there's definitely a small floodplain for this stream. Flood-prone width value is a little over 2 times the bankful width, so the data matches what we're seeing in the photos. I wouldn't be too concerned with this. Next, we're going to look over bank cover instability. Since we did have some concerns with the critical concepts lines, hey Drew, we want to pay a little bit more attention to this. Here we can see in the data summary, we have the crew recorded 37 of their bank plots as erosional, with 5 being depositional, which those numbers seem completely acceptable given the photos we saw. Percent bank stable is 85. Again, I would agree with that. Based off the photos, I do not see any instability features. Lastly, percent banks covered. This is at 32, which jumps out as a huge red flag for me. At 32% cover, and then trying to look at some of these banks that are covered in pretty dense grasses. I would, as the project lead, I would say that these banks are covered and that this data, the crew is doing something wrong. So we'll take a look at this a little bit more. This year we're asking for crews to start uploading bank plots. These will either be EB for erosional bank, DB for depositional bank. We're also asking them to take pictures of erosional features they encounter. So if they see a slough at a site like this, we want to see them take a picture of that slough, so we're not like seeing one instability feature while everything else is absent. So first, like I said, we previously noted the scour was too low. So we want to go back to the bank cover and stability photos. Was the plot placed correctly? Is this impacting data adversely? What do we think? So here in this photo, we can see the transect flag going out to the scour. We can see their bank stability plot that they were using to come up with their cover values. This, I think the plot was definitely placed incorrectly, given the scour line is out in the water so far. In the protocol for step 6E, we've listed some typical questions you'll want to ask yourself and possibly the crew. So we'll go over some of those right now. First question would be, did the crew place the plot in the correct location, i.e. correctly identify scour and bankful features? And like we said, no, this looks like it'd be too low. I'm expecting scour to be up about where bankful is, and bankful to be somewhere up above between in this area right here. Like I said before, I would expect this to be an orange line indicating that bankful and the bench feature are the same. Next, we want to think about, did the crew correctly identify depositional versus erosional banks? So I think it was 37 of their plots were erosional and 5 were depositional, so I have no concerns with that. Did the crew correctly estimate foliar cover? If I look at the data summary cover values, and then look at the pictures, I'm not sure what's going on, but the cover values are extremely low. Maybe it's just because they called scour too low, but I can't say it for sure, and I'd want to talk this out with the crew and try and get them to explain to me what they were looking at and why they collected data this way, so that then we know how to address this and correct it and make sure that they are going in the right direction and collecting the correct data for the rest of the season. Did the crew correctly include perennial vegetation, including senescent vegetation, and exclude annual vegetation as cover? Again, I need to talk to the crew. These banks are definitely covered, yet their values say they're not. Lastly, did the crew properly identify erosional features, fracture, slump, slough, eroding? Most of the banks at this site look like there's no erosional features, and the crew's data matches that, since it said it was like 85% stable. But given the lack of diversity in banks at this reach, I'd want to keep my eye out for more difficult reaches in the future that the crew might encounter, where it has more variety of different types of erosional features. So next for 6F, we're going to review special situations. If I go back to my data summary, we already said that the crew said this was a partial sample, which means, again, that they missed either one of their 11 main, or they did not collect completely one of their 11 main transects or 10 intermediate transects. Here, column Y, beaver flow modification, they said there's no beavers modification, so that rules out. Beaver special situation protocol, crew said they had 0 side channels. We're not worried about that. If you notice that these values are different, I would refer to the TR75-2. Basically, just go to the special situations and Appendix C and review that and make sure you kind of discuss some of the issues the crew might have encountered at the site. It's good to kind of test them and ask them, for instance, how did you measure bench height when you had an island? You could ask them that when they had the side channel and try and trick them and see if they remember. You don't measure bench height on an island, you measure it on the outer bank. So as a review, we just went over A through F of Step 6, Photo and Data Summary Review. Found on page 17. So as a review, we found that the crew did not take all the required photos, and their bank full scour and bench heights were incorrect. We noticed that they were supposed to be collecting thowag, and they did not collect thowag, or at least we don't have any record of it. And we need to check and see if the crew recorded that on a paper data sheet or somewhere on their iPad that hasn't been transcribed over. Problems with critical concepts impacted bank cover estimates, but we also want to make sure the crew wasn't doing anything wrong for cover. Maybe it wasn't just scour. Maybe they didn't think the grass was perennial or something else odd. We definitely want to talk to the crew about all these issues before they go out and sample more reaches. They did correctly locate and sample the reach, though, and they took good photos even though they missed a few. And they marked the reach correctly as a partial reach. Don't forget to highlight some of the good things they are doing, too. You also might not have all the answers or resolutions to the errors you find until after you speak with the crew. Remember, this is fine. Right now, you are just tracking errors, and you can always update them once you discuss with the crew. We'll go over how to resolve errors in the error log when we get to step 7 here in a few moments. So for this, before I get into the error log, there's one last step that we need to do. Is we need to come back over here into the web map. We need to click on the point. We need to update eval status. Sample data summary reviewed. As you can see, it changed to yellow, indicating that it's done. It's been approved by a BLMer. All right. So I'll go over now. We'll jump into the error log. If anyone is unsure where to find this, it is in the general channel on Teams in the QC folder. It's called error log. If you right-click on the file and say open in desktop, that tends to work the best. Basically, this document is set up so we have the first page, which is an how-to. This will provide some guidance on kind of how to use this workbook. For the most part, it's pretty straightforward. We have a field reported errors tab here, which is highlighted in bright yellow. This is where you will be recording anything that you notice or any errors you want to bring up while you're doing your QC review. Next, these errors here will be combined with errors we identify at the NOC, and these will then be pushed into all the other project-specific tabs that are down here at the bottom. So you'll just be recording errors in this Field Reported Errors tab. You'll respond to them all in another tab, and we'll cover that in the next session, or next segment of this presentation. So with this, basically, you're going to come in here, I'm going to scroll down, and just find the next available cells that you have to work with. Order doesn't matter. If your points are all spread out over a ton of rows, it doesn't make a difference at all. So, for this example, I'm going to use Anchorage Field Office. Then for the crew lead, this is John Smith. Point ID that I want to record. This last site that was sampled. You want to be very careful when you're entering your point IDs, just to make sure that you're entering the correct point ID. If not, it's going to just be extra confusing down the road when we're trying to resolve errors and you're saying there's an error with a site that doesn't exist because the point IDs were wrong. So I highly recommend double or triple checking that when you're entering that information. You have the date appended, which is 7/15. For data type, an indicator, method, or field, you go back to the How to Use page. Here down at the bottom, along the top of this table, we have all of the data types that you can choose, and then below that we have the subsequent value or % data missing. Feel free to use this. If you are really stumped and don't know where to kind of put the issue into, this isn't super critical, just a little bit helpful. So for our first issue, could do missing data, BOWAG, error for the error, type in crew did not select basically, I'm just noting, hey, you didn't collect the BOWAG. Maybe they have it on another sheet, but I need to check in on that with the crew on this. We're going to do 7/15, 2020 again. For the individual reviewed, I'm going to act like I'm the project lead, so I'm just going to put my name here. And for resolution here, I put that, I'm going to check with the crew to see if they have this recorded anywhere else already, so that we can try and pull that data in. So here I'm going to put for resolution, we'll discuss with crew, remind them to collect BOWAG if they do not have data and are going to be in the area again, please stop by and collect. Do that. Maybe just, if it's a hard to get to site, you're just like, you acknowledge there that we're just going to have missing file leg data for this site because it took the crew a 6-hour hike into this site to even get the data. So yeah. And also, for this example, I forgot that we said that they were limited in time. They only had a 4-hour window to sample. So maybe while you're speaking with the crew, they'll just be like, oh, we forgot to put that in our comments. That was the one thing that we were unable to collect completely. We hit our 4-hour mark, and then the landowner told us that we needed to leave. So, yeah. For my next error, if you're recording multiple and no one else is in the document, or like on this next row, you can easily just paste down again, just so that you make sure this is the same and this. So, like, yeah, it's going to be the same information for the same site. So, just make it easier on yourself. Next, we want to record their critical concepts. Looked off. As you can see here, we give options for scour placement, bank full, or bench, but there's no all feature. So on this, you can just type into these, and it'll try until it asks you, is this what you're looking for? But you can just keep typing in. For this example, all of their lines looked off. So we're just going to leave it like that. Scour, bench, and bank full all looked off. We need to discuss what the crew was keen in on at site. Again, we're just making a note that, oh, hey, this stuff looks off, and I need to make sure that we cover it, or we need to discuss it and figure out why these values look so off. We'll review with crew. So I'm just going to sit down, and then once I review with the crew, if we find out more information, you can add that in then, at that point. For right now, that's all we really need. Next here, we're going to say their bank stability and cover. Here we would just say bank cover, since we felt like the bank type and stability they seemed acceptable. All we had issues with was cover. We put bank cover there. Crew recorded X% cover because I forget what it was. So I'd recommend putting in the actual value that you see in your thing. This is extremely low for a veg. In this situation, probably just going to need to omit the cover data, but we still want to make sure that we're discussing this with the crew because we don't want this issue to impact more sites throughout the season. We want to make sure this is addressed early on and that the crew knows how to properly collect this. Again, I'm just going to put that information there. And for the resolution, omit cover. And then the last error, I'm going to record going to be here. We're going to go to scene data, photos. Appears we are missing photos. Need to remind crew to upload the non-annotated versions. Yeah, and we would. So upload non-annotated versions, or check to make sure they don't have the missing photos on another device. Cool. So that would be how you'd enter errors in the error log. So after finishing steps 5 and 6 for all reaches in the data summary, we recommend considering if there are any consistent problems the crew is having frequently. Are they often low on photo numbers or putting in scour too low? They seem to have a ton of partial reaches. In this situation, they were just low on photo numbers, but many times you'll start to see a pattern in bank stability and cover or critical concepts. This can help direct the conversation you have with the crew and help them understand where they might be going wrong. And one other thing about this whole steps 5 and 6 is that sometimes you'll find that the crew samples some really tricky sites and you'll even struggle to look at the photos and make sense of it. I notice this quite frequently as well, and I'm messaging Scott and Nicole and Jennifer, trying to get them on the phone just to look at a photo with me and talk through the photos and see if everything makes sense. So if you're struggling with the photo, I highly recommend using Teams. You can reach out to other people in your state that are kind of familiar with similar systems and try and have just a discussion with them to see what they see in the photo and see if you're looking at the same issues or same, and kind of ID what the crew might be doing wrong. If you still need help, you're more than welcome to reach out to us at the NOC, and we can try and help review any photos that you're really struggling with to make sense of. So, are there any questions now before I get into step 7, which will be resolving errors in the error log?
Hey, Logan, let me make sure everybody's unmuted. Or well. Okay, does anybody have any questions now?
I have a question about photos. So obviously we're having a lot of issues with them uploading to the box. Should we be tracking in the error log how many are actually going to the box versus how many are on Teams? And right now, as they're zipping them into Teams, is there an easier way to view the photos without having to download all of the zipped files?
So right now we're working to try and get all those photos ingested. So hopefully those will be on box here soon, even for the sites the crew has struggled with submitting final data for. We know that there's been an issue with not all the photos being uploaded. We're going to be releasing a new version of the app later today that the crews will need to download and start using. We think that this should be resolving this issue. We've also made some fixes to our server. They're very hopeful that next week that all this will be moving properly, including some of the oddities that have been raised with the bank cover instability and bank type accounts that are in the data summary as well.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, a little more specifics on the bank stability issues, since I'm not sure everybody was aware of those. So there was a consistent issue in the data summary with bank stability. So far, we're finding that the calculated values in that data summary are about half of what they should be if you redo the calculations and look at the calculations correctly. And so I'm going to release a version of Sarah that's going to fix that problem today, so that from now on, once the crew updates to this version of Sarah, the bank stability values should be correct. But if you're looking at old data summaries, don't freak out if your stability is about half what it should be. Kind of check with the crew and see if that looks correctly, and we'll send out some revised values for those sites hopefully next week, so that y'all will have a better sense of what those stability values should have been.
Have there been any issues with some of the bank stability and cover plots not making it into the data summary at all? We have a couple sites, I guess, where it looks like I feel like we've collected the data, but then when you go to read the summary, there's just, doesn't add up to 42 plots.
Yeah, was that Gabe? Yeah, I'm looking into that. I believe we're receiving all of that data, so I wouldn't be too concerned about it. I'm going to double check on that today, and I'll follow up if it looks like we're missing any data, but I suspect those calculations, like I was just saying with the bank stability, might have been affecting, the same kind of issue might have been affecting the data summary for the number of plots that were sampled. So I believe that's just an artifact. I'm going to confirm that later today.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
All right. Any more questions before we jump into the last section? All right. So now we're going to resolve our errors. Again, this is step 7 in the data management protocol. Please follow along if you'd like. This needs to occur about every month, but to be honest, the faster that you get your issues resolved, you tend to have higher quality results and data. For example, if there is a question for the crew and you don't get to it for a month, they might forget details of the situation, and the data may just need to be removed completely at that point. We need the crews, project leads, and contractors to be looking at this file because errors will require input from different folks. National AIM team updates and reviews the error log on a weekly basis. Resolving errors is important to ensure high-quality data, but also to prevent the crew from continuing to make mistakes, which can be frustrating for them, especially when you're looking at the data at the end of the season, realizing that you didn't look over it all season, things needed to be removed. So the NOC will be posting errors. We're going to start posting them regularly next week. Right now, there's only a few in the error log so far. We'll run these error scripts and post errors on Thursdays. And the types of errors we will be looking for at the NOC are typical value checks, such as we do things like what if pools was partially collected. We're going to make sure that the pool reach length is not greater than or equal to the total reach length. So basically that's just saying if the crew says their reach was only 60 meters long, that was their partial reach, then why did you really collect the full 150 meters of pools? Do some logic checks for things like the crew said the reach was partially sampled, but the data indicates the crew recorded transects as dry and recorded bow egg depths as 0. In this case, this indicates the status might be improperly applied and should be changed to partial and interrupted flow, which we added this year. Last, we did some visual screening of raw data to look for mistyped or fat-fingered responses that made it through final QA. An example of this would be the crew recorded 3 pools at a site. 2 of them are 2 meters, and then they have one that's 22 meters long. And just seeing, is that one pool really 22 meters? So stuff like that. Again, for step 7, we recommend having all the same tools that you've had open so far this whole process open. That will include photos from Box, photo comments from Teams, data summaries, the data management protocol, the web map, and obviously the error log. So open up the error log again now. Remember before when we were recording errors, we were recording them here in the field reported errors tab. Now if I go over to another project, here for instance is Canyon Country, we can see that here's all errors that we've identified so far for here, for this one project. Basically, in each of these tabs, the only thing that you're able to edit is P through R. So you'll see all of these other fields that are filled out have crazy equations in there, but if you try and click on it, it's protected. I'm just trying to open another document now. Okay. I'm on Excel. Okay. So yeah, only these three fields. For this example, I'm going to go back to Anchorage project. Here we can see a bunch of errors. For errors you identified in Field Reported Errors tab, this information is then copied over into this pertinent field data comments field. As you can see, it says field reported error, date reviewed, July 2nd, individual reviewed was myself, resolution, data can be found here. So basically it consolidates these notes down into one record for this to accompany this error that you identified. So for some of this stuff, it might not require like these where the crew zipped it up. These are records for us to know when we're ingesting data. We can just kind of go down the list and check off boxes saying, okay, this data that they said was uploaded here, we just went, we ingested all this, now we can check this off. So for the most part, you can ignore the crew's messages about their XMLs. Here we have one about some missing photos. Here we have one about critical concepts. So let me find one I can resolve. Here we have one. Units or precision typo. Pool length. One pool recorded at this site with a max depth of 10 centimeters, tail of 4, and a length of 101 meters. If you're looking at photos, I don't think 101 meter, I don't see a 101 meter pool. Do you remember what this should be? Should it be 1.01 or 10.1 meters? So if I was the project lead reviewing this, I would check in with the crew. I would kind of discuss this with them, see what if they remembered. Let's say 7/2 is the date. I'm the project lead, so I'm going to put my name down here. It looks like my stuff is updates. I missed something. So you would just record in this R column. Basically, I sat down with the crew. I discussed the issue. This should have been a 1.01 meters. Issues resolved. We'll have stuff in here like we're trying to flag a lot more water quality issues. So some of this stuff might be easy. You might just be able to look at this, kind of look at the point on the map and see where it's at and then know, is this reasonable or not? And you can just say reasonable, not reasonable. Maybe the crew forgot to calibrate, need to check with them, stuff like that. As you record these issues, then we then ingest all these comments that you've responded to the errors at the NOC, and then we'll go through and make our data edits, and then you'll see those edits will appear here in column S, not completed data edits. This will basically say the action that we took, like you said, omit the data, so we agreed we're going to omit the data, so bank cover has been removed at this site. Or in this situation for pools, this pool has been updated in the database. It's no longer 101 meters. It's now updated to 1.01. So at the end of the season, if you're trying to look back at, oh wait, why did these values change? You have a list of every error that's been raised both from the field and from the NOC, and we just have it all in one place to kind of reference as well. One thing that's nifty with this year is on different tabs, you can just parse this out and just use the filter option. If I only want to look at this one site, I can do that. If I'm only just kind of looking over this, we just want to see what's our missing data. Okay, we're missing photos and Thawag. That's pretty helpful. Also, we have this resolved column. Basically, once this not completed data edits column is updated and we say, okay, yeah, we changed your value, so this is complete. Basically, the resolved will update to yes. In some situations, this might take a little bit of back and forth as we try and discuss and make sure we're both agreeing and on the same page about what needs to happen on the issue. So this might not automatically update to yes. Generally, once we make the data edit and we don't think the issue needs to be on your plate anymore, they'll change to yes, and then you can filter out all resolved. So you're only looking at things that still need a response, pretty much. Yeah, that is the error log. Does anyone have any questions with how they'll any of this? Anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out. Also, I wanted to let everyone know that we are planning on having an upcoming another webinar recording on indicator, computed indicators, and how to review that. So keep an eye out for more information on that. It will be coming out in the next couple of weeks.